Hi, my name is Ian Sanchez. My preferred pronouns are he, she, or they. I accept all pronouns. I am non-binary. I identify as Afro-Latino, but to be honest, I just say that I'm Black when people ask me because more to the point, please do not call me Morenito. I do understand that it's a common sentiment in, the Caribbean, at least where I'm from. But I think that it's 2021 and it's time to shake up these ideas that we hold dear to us. I speak English and I speak Spanish. I'm trying to learn Portuguese. This is what looking bilingual means to me.
What does identifying as Black mean in regards to your Latinidad?
I think for a lot of people that I've interacted with, the term Hispanic, has a certain image that it comes with. And so as a Black person, and when I say Black, I mean somebody with you know, relatively dark skin. I have pretty coarse hair. I have very African features. Those features don't feel very celebrated sometimes in the way that European features are. So I intentionally identify as Black just to show my solidarity with my African heritage and just to raise awareness that hi, we exist. So it mainly came out of I noticed that depending on how I looked that day, whether I had my hair done a certain way or whatever, people would either recognize me as Black or Hispanic. And I realized that when I just let my hair go a little more, I look more Black. I just realized there are just things about me that that people just see and they're like, oh, okay, you're not just Hispanic or something. But it's you can be, there's no one look.
Something that I love when we talk, because it's not something I usually hear. And I have to be honest with you, and I was so relieved to hear this from you, but you told me about how you had such a strong BIPOC community at your high school and that how that reinforced your identity, reinforced you creatively. And that to me was yes, because you usually hear the opposite. So can you tell us about how that strong BIPOC community at your high school just helped form you?
I went to a school where I think at the time it was under 20% of the school were white people. So, and while I did experience racism, absolutely, it felt less dramatic than in ways that I was seeing in other places.
Yeah.
So it made me feel empowered because I felt like they were outnumbered. So, it's power numbers a real thing. It's just there are just certain things that you can't say, certain ways that you can't act, when there's a large group of people around you. Also, it was great to just see so many people that looked like myself because then you can see the dimension in diversity. I saw different ways to express Blackness, and that was very rewarding.
Different ways to express Blackness. So can you explain what that is to you? Because I want to make sure that people understand what that means to you.
Yeah. So I actually was friends with a lot of people of color who went to all white schools, and it was kind of they were the example. They were the Black culture for the whole school. They were the only Black person. So it's almost like they were carrying all that on their shoulders. Whereas in my school, you kind of saw the whole rainbow. You saw Black people who were Latino, Black people who were half white, maybe half Latino, Black people who were just pure African American, Black. I mean, just all kinds of ways to express yourself, different hairstyles, different attitudes. I was in choir, so different voices. It wasn't just a bunch of white people singing.
I love that,
so,
different voices. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't really, I guess, appreciate it until I left high school and I went to a pretty white college, and I was like, wow, the movies are real, I guess. This is true. There's schools where everyone's white. But yeah, there are definitely ways to behave that aren't monitored or regulated by people of color in all white schools.
Right, absolutely. No, and thank you for explaining that, because I think it's a perspective that some people might be like, oh, wow, this does exist. It's not something that we only have to create. It's something that is out there. We just have to cultivate it. Who is Ian in English? And who is Ian in Spanish? And is there another Ian?
Ah! Oh, there's so many Ians, honey. But so Ian in English, I think, is the Ian that most people know and love, or hate. And I speak English better, so I definitely feel like I can express myself better in English. My personality can be more, like you can see more of it
Mhm.
because I can use like idioms that are familiar to Americans or like certain types of irony in the way that I talk, or just little colloquialisms that help you like communicate with other people.
Yeah.
Whereas in Spanish, it sometimes feels very like, I'm very limited and what I have to say, like I can't use my like the full colors of my palette. And so Ian in Spanish is, I feel like, more shy and like quiet and rarely gets sassy with you because Ian in Spanish can't get sassy.
I don't know if I believe that. I don't know.
No, my sister speaks Spanish better. So when she's angry, she'll actually go into Spanish like clockwork. Like it's just like but for me, like I start speaking English. Like I can't be angry in Spanish.
No, and that's a very real thing. I mean, there's a lot of people, I mean, depending on the language, for each person, but that's a real thing. I usually describe when I get really angry, both start firing off. And then I'm like,
Mhm.
blah, 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 I get really.
And I think there is another Ian. I feel like I'm somebody who's always evolving and changing, whether it's within my Latinidad or in other aspects. So I think every year is a new opportunity to meet a new Ian. So
I love that. That needs to be a tagline somewhere.
yes,
Have
okay,
you be
great.
like, every year,
Right?
you have many
Every
opportunities. They
He's
hire
like,
me.
you're not the man I fell in love with. He's like, yeah, that was like 5 Ians ago. Like, what are you talking about? Just kidding.
Eons. There's so much here. How can Latinos better support other Latinos who live in a Black space?
Oh, great question. I would say one way is to be conscious of um, making distinctions between like a Black Hispanic and somebody who's not Black and who is Hispanic as like a negro. Like that's something that I hear a lot. And it's a way to like separate it, you know, like so that's one way.
Do you mean like
Um,
to prevent othering by using those words?
Yeah, exactly. Like even endearing terms like negrito or
Yeah.
morenito, like I totally understand and it's cute. Like my mom calls me that. When my mom calls me that, it's fine. Like my rule for that is like if you're my family member, like that's fine. But if you're not, like don't call me negrito, please.
What I'm hearing from you is, and correct me if I'm wrong, or language is important, and language indicates thought process, it indicates intention, it indicates um, how somebody might think of a group
Yeah.
of people or even an individual, but in this context, a group of people. And in our culture, there's a certain way that usually happens, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking also like so many times when like people are like, oh, I thought you were like Black or like you're Hispanic. Like that's something that I hear a lot. Like that's another way to kind of protect Black people of color from being othered is just to not make that distinction unless it's relevant to the conversation. Like if you guys are talking about, African heritage, clearly, but in like a normal setting, yeah, it's very clear when someone is like can see you like as two different, like, oh, you're Black and Hispanic. Like
It's just really interesting because one of my other interviewees, actually, I had a couple people say something like this, but she was like, and she's Dominican, and she's like, I'm Black and Hispanic, like I could be both things. Like she's like, why are people like, wait?
yeah, exactly. That happens all the time. They're like, oh, like you speak Spanish. Like I thought you were Black. And it's like I am Black. Like I am.
It's like, wait a minute, hold on. So it's one of those things where it's like people just don't understand. Like they need to that
Yeah.
inherent need to categorize.
So like race isn't really acknowledged in the scientific community. Like it's just kind of like a social like understanding. Like it's like not really real. It's like what does white mean? What does Black mean? Like I think that we use these terms so seriously to define people, like even in like applications, like all kinds of paperwork, like
Yeah.
when in reality these things are fictional, like as fictional as Harry Potter. Like, it's like, unless you are a scientist and you are like looking at my DNA and you're telling me where like roughly my ancestors came in some region of some country, like unless you're doing that, like it shouldn't even be part of the conversation, you know? So like if it were up to me, like I just wish we would all, like, I'm not trying to say I don't see race, because we are entrenched in a race world. So we definitely need to use, need to have that in the conversation, and like, but I hope, we all know in the back of our minds that like, it's not really real. Like, being white isn't real. Like, that's just something we make up, because there's just like an infinite amount of lines you could draw. Like, who's white enough? Whose hair is like soft enough? Is your nose bridge like 7? I don't even know, like 2 inches. I don't. It's like,
Right.
it's so
Yeah.
arbitrary. Like,
yeah. No. So, is there anything that maybe wasn't part of a question that you'd like to say that you didn't have the opportunity to say, or something that you feel you want to put out there as part of your interview?
Hi, my name is Ian, and Dominicans are Black people too.
Yes.
That is what I want to say.